This was not to happen. The chromosphere was to be ours. Now all we have is a pile of debris. You, General, are to blame.
He failed to deactivate the radar centers. I believe he is aware of the punishment.
Take him out and shoot him. Get him out of my sight.
Comrade Stalin, the General is not responsible for the destruction of the chromosphere. I personally monitored his actions.
And who then would be to blame? Clearly, the General is at fault.
Yet, comrade, it was you who failed in your actions. You did not inform the General of the other Allied transmitter that was nearby.
Is this true, Kukov? Was there a fourth transmitter?
We did not notice it on the first pass, but yes.
You disappoint me, Kukov. If the chronosphere is not to be ours, then let it be buried with the remains of the Allied dogs. Where are they? Nadia, where's their base of operations located?
We have traced Einstein's signal. He has moved to the coast of England. It must be the center of the command.
General, consider this your redemption. You are to lead the attack on the Allied headquarters. Level it! Destroy forever all traces of the Alliance.
Comrade Commander...
Continue! Comrade. And you will find yourself on the floor with Kukov. Assemble a strike team. A continental Soviet Union is our destiny.
Reinforcements have arrived.
Yes, sir.
Reinforcements have arrived.
Acknowledge. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Acknowledge. Awaiting orders. Acknowledge. Comrade, acknowledge. Affirmative. Affirmative. Waiting orders. Acknowledge. Affirmative. 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 Acknowledge. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Acknowledge. Perfect. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. 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 Reporting.
Unit lost. Unit
Comrades,
lost.
acknowledge. Yes, sir.
Cannot deploy.
Affirmative. Affirmative.
Unit lost.
Yes, sir.
Reconstruction
Acknowledge.
options. Building.
Yes, sir.
Unit lost.
Affirmative.
Construction complete.
Affirmative. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Acknowledge.
Reconstruction options. Building.
Yes, sir. Affirmative. Acknowledge. 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 Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Affirmative. Affirmative.
Construction
Affirmative.
complete.
Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledge.
Unit lost. New construction options. Building. Repairing. Construction complete. New construction options. Our base is under
Waiting
attack.
order.
Building.
Affirmative. Acknowledged.
Construction complete.
Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Cannot deploy here. Building. Unit lost.
Yes, sir. Acknowledged.
Our base is under attack. Construction complete.
Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged.
Building.
Comrade, acknowledged. Affirmative. 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 Acknowledged. 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 Affirmative.
Construction complete.
Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Unit lost.
Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. 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 Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Reporting.
Unit lost.
Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged.
Silos needed. Unit
Acknowledged.
lost.
Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. 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 Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged.
Unit
Affirmative.
lost.
Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative.
Silos needed.
Affirmative.
Unit lost.
Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Ready. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged.
Silos needed.
Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Unit lost.
Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Unit lost.
Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. The product of a tortured brain. Feeling of helplessness.
Building. Repairing. Construction complete. Unit lost. Our base is under attack. Building. Repairing. Training. Unit ready. Training.
Reporting.
Unit
Of
ready.
course.
Training. Unit ready.
Acknowledged. Of course.
Construction complete. Silos needed. Unit
Of
lost.
course.
New construction options. Silos needed. Building. Our base is under attack. Building.
Acknowledged. Agreed. Yes, sir.
Construction complete. Unit ready. New construction options. Building. Construction complete. Silos needed. Building. Silos needed. Construction complete. Silos needed.
Yes, sir.
Silos needed. Building.
Awaiting orders. Affirmative.
Construction complete. Building. Silos needed.
Reporting.
Silos needed. Silos needed. Construction complete. Training. Unit ready. Training. Unit ready. New construction options. Building.
Reporting. At once.
Construction complete. Silos needed. Building. Building. Construction complete. New construction options. Building. Unit ready. Building. Construction complete. New construction options. Building.
Reporting. Affirmative. Yes, sir. At once. Yes, sir.
Unit ready.
At once.
Building.
Yes, sir. At once. Affirmative.
Construction complete.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Unit lost.
Yes, sir. Very well. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Very well. Affirmative. Very well. Yes, sir.
New construction options. Building. Unit ready.
Acknowledged. Very well. Yes, sir. Affirmative.
Unit lost. Unit lost. Construction complete. Unit ready. Building. Our base is under attack. Building. Spy plane ready. Construction complete.
Affirmative.
Building. Unit ready.
Reporting. Affirmative. Vehicle reporting. Acknowledged. Yes, sir.
Unit
Acknowledged.
prepared.
Affirmative.
Repairing. Our base is under attack. Unit ready. Building.
Yes, sir. Acknowledged. 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 Affirmative.
Construction complete. Iron curtain charging. Building.
Yes, sir. Affirmative. Acknowledged.
Unit ready.
Awaiting for acknowledged.
Our base is under attack.
Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative.
Construction
Acknowledged.
building.
Yes, sir. Affirmative. 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 Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Our base is under
Acknowledged.
attack.
Affirmative.
Construction complete.
Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Reporting. Affirmative.
Building. Construction
Yes, sir.
complete.
Acknowledged.
Silos needed. Building. Silos needed. Construction complete. Our base is under attack. Building. Repairing. Repairing.
Affirmative.
Construction
Acknowledged.
complete. Building.
Yes, sir. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged.
Construction complete. Building. Silos needed.
Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged.
Construction complete.
Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged.
Silos
Acknowledged.
needed.
Affirmative.
Silos needed.
Acknowledged.
Silos needed. Building.
Comrade, acknowledged. Affirmative.
Construction complete. Our base is under attack. Building.
Yes, sir. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged.
Construction
Affirmative.
complete.
Affirmative. 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 Acknowledged. Yes, sir. Acknowledged.
Silos needed. Silos
Acknowledged.
needed.
Acknowledged.
Our base is under attack. Building. Repairing.
Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Construction complete.
Affirmative.
Unit lost.
Comrade, acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Silos
Acknowledged.
needed.
Comrade, affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative. Affirmative.
Silos
Acknowledged.
needed.
Acknowledged.
Unit lost. Silos needed.
Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative.
Select target.
Comrade, sir.
Unit lost. Select target. Select target. Silos needed. Reinforcements online. Unit lost. Silos needed. Iron curtain ready. Unit lost. Silos needed. Building. Repairing. Silos needed. Our base is under attack. Repairing.
Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Yes, sir. Affirmative.
Unit ready. Building. Repairing.
Yes, sir. Acknowledged.
Building. Unit ready. Unit prepared.
Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Yes, sir.
Spy plane
Acknowledged.
ready. Construction complete. Unit ready.
Awaiting orders.
Building.
Vehicle reporting. Yes, sir. Affirmative.
Repairing. Building.
Yes,
Unit
sir.
prepared.
Acknowledged.
Unit ready. Building.
Yes, sir. Affirmative. Acknowledged.
Construction complete.
Acknowledged.
Building. Unit ready. Building.
Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged.
Construction complete. Unit ready. Building.
Yes, sir.
Construction complete.
Affirmative. Acknowledged.
Unit ready. Building.
Command and conquer.
Construction complete. Building.
Waiting order. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative.
Unit ready. Building.
Affirmative. Affirmative. Affirmative.
Construction
Acknowledged.
complete.
Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Our
Affirmative.
base is under attack. Unit ready. Building.
Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. 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 Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Acknowledged.
Construction
Acknowledged.
complete. Unit ready. Building. Building.
Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Waiting order. Acknowledged. Acknowledged.
Unit ready.
Awaiting
Construction
order.
complete.
Acknowledged. Yes, sir.
Our base is under attack.
Acknowledged.
Building. Construction complete. New construction options. Building.
Yes, sir. Acknowledged.
Unit ready. Building.
Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. 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 Affirmative.
Unit ready.
Acknowledged.
Building.
Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Unit ready.
Affirmative.
Building. Unit ready.
Affirmative.
Building.
Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Unit ready. Building.
Affirmative. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Affirmative.
Unit ready. Building.
Affirmative. Awaiting order. Acknowledged.
Unit ready.
Acknowledged. Affirmative. 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 Comrade, acknowledged.
Repairing. Building. Unit ready.
Vehicle report. Affirmative.
Building.
Acknowledged. Affirmative. Yes, sir.
Unit ready.
Affirmative.
Building.
Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Naval unit lost. Unit ready.
Acknowledged.
Building.
Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Unit ready.
Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Yes, sir. Affirmative.
Select target. Select target. Reinforcements have arrived. Unit lost. Unit lost. Unit lost.
Comrade, acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Vehicle reporting. Affirmative. 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 Comrade, acknowledged.
Silos needed.
Acknowledged. Waiting order.
Spike lane ready.
Acknowledged.
Silos needed. Silos needed.
Reporting. Affirmative.
Silos needed. Silos needed.
Yes, sir. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Yes, sir. Acknowledged.
Silos needed.
Awaiting order. Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Silos needed. base is under attack. Prepare. Silos needed.
Reporting. Affirmative.
Silos needed.
Vehicle reporting. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Silos
Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Silos
Affirmative.
needed.
Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Silos
Acknowledged.
needed.
Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Select target. Silos needed. I'm touching.
Yes, sir. Acknowledged.
Silos needed.
Affirmative. Ready and
Unit
waiting.
lost.
Acknowledged. 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 Affirmative. 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 Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative.
lost.
Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged.
Silos
Affirmative.
needed.
Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. 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 Acknowledge. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Acknowledge.
Silos needed.
Yes, sir.
Our base is under attack. Silos needed.
Yes, sir. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Acknowledge.
Silos needed.
Affirmative.
Silos
Acknowledge. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Affirmative. Affirmative.
Silos
Affirmative.
needed.
Acknowledge. Affirmative. Acknowledge. 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 Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledge. 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 Acknowledge.
Silence.
Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Acknowledge.
Silos needed.
Affirmative. 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 Acknowledge. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledge.
Silos needed.
Acknowledge. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Acknowledge.
Silence.
Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. 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 Affirmative.
Silence needed.
Acknowledge. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Silos needed.
Acknowledged.
Select target. Reinforcements have arrived. Silos needed.
Reporting. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Silos needed.
Affirmative. Acknowledged.
Unit lost.
Affirmative. Acknowledged.
Unit lost.
Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Acknowledged.
Silos needed.
Affirmative. 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 Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged.
Emerge from the shadows, and now we will be
Acknowledged.
Silos needed.
Affirmative.
Silos needed.
Affirmative. Affirmative.
If you fail, do not.
Yes, sir. Acknowledged.
No, sir.
Affirmative.
If you fail,
Unit lost.
Waiting source of acknowledged. Affirmative.
Silos needed.
Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Acknowledge.
Silos needed.
Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative.
Silos
Affirmative.
needed.
Affirmative. Affirmative.
Silos needed.
Acknowledge. Affirmative. Affirmative.
Silos
Affirmative.
needed.
Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledge.
Silos needed.
Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative.
Iron curtain ready.
Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledge.
Silos needed. Select target. Silos needed.
Yes, sir. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Acknowledged. Vehicle reporting. Affirmative.
Silos needed.
Acknowledged.
Silos needed.
Acknowledged. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Affirmative.
Silos needed.
Vehicle reporting. Acknowledged.
Select target. Silos needed. Reinforcements have arrived. Spy plane ready. Unit lost. Silos needed. Silos needed. Unit lost.
Reporting. Acknowledged.
Silos
Yes, sir.
needed.
At once.
Unit lost. Silos needed. Unit lost.
Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. 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 Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged.
Silos needed.
Affirmative. 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 Acknowledged. Affirmative. 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 Acknowledged. 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 Affirmative.
Silos needed. Spy plane ready.
Acknowledged.
Select target. Silos needed.
Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Acknowledged.
Silos needed.
Comrade. Affirmative. Acknowledged.
Silos needed. Silos needed.
Affirmative.
Our base is under attack.
Affirmative.
Silos needed.
Yes, sir. Of course.
Unit lost. Silos needed.
Yes, sir. Acknowledged.
Spike lane ready.
Affirmative.
Silos needed.
Acknowledged.
Silos needed.
Acknowledged.
Silos needed.
Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Select target. Reinforcements have arrived. Silos needed.
Vehicle
Silos
reporting.
needed.
Affirmative.
Silos needed.
Awaiting order. Yes, sir.
Naval unit lost.
Yes, sir. Of course.
Silos
Yes, sir.
needed.
Yes, sir. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Awaiting orders. Affirmative. Comrade.
Silos needed.
Affirmative.
Silos needed. Silos
Affirmative.
needed.
Acknowledged. Affirmative. Reporting at once.
Spike lane ready. Silos needed. Silos
Affirmative. Very well.
needed. Select target.
Reporting. Affirmative.
Silos needed. Select target.
Reporting. Affirmative.
Silos needed.
Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Silos needed.
Comrade. Acknowledged.
Silos needed.
Affirmative.
Mission accomplished.